Welcome back to another episode of On Patrol. I am Fightin Kentuckian, and I'm here with.
Wyndehurst Productions.
And today we're going to talk from our long hiatus. We're going to talk about a war game that's been out there for a while, a favorite of everybody's. But we wanted to do a deep dive and a rules review for you guys. And this is Blood Red Skies. So Blood Red Skies, we're going to go into our normal categories that we talk about today, and we really look forward to kind of peeling back this game. You've seen it played probably, you've heard about it in the last, 2018 is when it came out. But before we get into any of that, we need to explain to the audience, viewer and listener, where we've been, what's been going on. So I'll turn it over to Wyndehurst Productions for our next kind of segment.
Yep, so thanks, Kentuckian. So Alibis, caveats, and piggybacks. Talking about last episode if you're new to the channel, and then we'll talk about last episode, and then just where we've been, what's going on. So we didn't do an episode last month. That is because I am in transition. I just got back to the U.S. from being overseas, and I was in the preparation stages for that. Obviously, there's difficulties that come with that. This is our second attempt at recording this episode, and I've had to relocate to a local war game store, DM's Game Revolt. Kindly is letting me use their kind of role-playing room. They've got Wi-Fi I'm tapping into, so hopefully this recording will be successful. So obviously there's challenges with that, and Kentuckian will tell you what he was doing last month, but we just couldn't pull it off. This month is going to be a late episode, and potentially next month could also have some hiccups or a late or early episode. We'll have to see. But yeah, so I haven't really gotten to do very much hobbying. Obviously, I got some games in a Blood Red Sky in preparation. Our last episode was the interview with Big Battles, which we had some technical difficulty. I don't have my normal recording set up, so I think I've got everything figured out today. So hopefully you'll have audio and visual. But yeah, so just bear with us, and hopefully in a month or two we'll kind of settle back down and be more of what you're used to. But yeah, that's all I've got. Kentuckian, what do you got for us?
My only question is where Wyndehurst kind of traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to get back to Estados Unidos. There's war gamers in the military, we know that, and there's war gamers that have just traveled overseas or lived overseas. Wyndehurst, he posted a lot on his page about kind of the journey and taking care of his models, and then he didn't bring everything. I know when he got back to the States and got into storage units and stuff, he was able to pull out blood and plunder ships and stuff that he thought was maybe too fragile to go to Europe with him. But for those on here right now, I'm very curious, and I'll be in the military for a minute, good Lord willing. So the idea would be is like, hey, come up on the net, come up on patrol, and as we're in the middle of PCS season, if there's somebody who's listening to this podcast, is active duty military, retired, or whatever, and has done it before, like how did you get, especially where lead was a big part of the hobby for a long time, how did you get this? How did you move with that? I'd be very curious to hear that. So going back into my alibis and caveats, piggybacks, got to do Normandy 81, same thing. If you watch the division page, I was at Precourt Manor. We were able to do a battlefield tour for the commanding general. Everything was awesome. Great time. And then the medieval arcades that I sent and was gifted them to Karen Tan. If you saw all the pictures on my hobby page, I really didn't let anything out of the bag until I was really close. I had a lot of help from my friends, James Napier. Some people were asking me, like, the base of those models are 3D prints, and then I textured them and weathered them up and built a board, added some paratroopers running in on it, and then tried to capture as close as I could to what it would look like in 1944. One of the pictures I used, I was given the French historian there in Carentan, Denis. He's written a bunch of books. He would send me pictures and try to match colors and everything. It was just an awesome project. But I know that there was one kind of image that I used that was like a 1930s or something before. And I tried to match the markings. Did as good a job as I could. So, but I appreciate any criticism and stuff. There was, Denis had told me, he's like, hey, you could have added some writing onto this other building. And James Napier of the 502nd up there in Louisville, he was saying the same thing. But I was crunched for time. I know Wyndehurst was like talking to me the day before I got on a plane. The trip had a bunch of snafus in it, but it was great. I got to speak at two events, Angeville-au-Plain and Saint-Côme-du-Mont, and to represent the division definitely is going to be a highlight in my military career, especially the prestigious and storied division. But just like Wyndehurst saying, I'm moving too, getting ready to head to the Great Commonwealth of Virginia. So my War Games room is in disarray. And when we talk to kind of future planning, we'll go through that a little bit more. But really happy with our kind of last few episodes that we were able to piece together before the summer moves hit us both at the same time, square in the nose. Great interview with, a kind of a War Games Holiday Center-like place. With those cats in England, and then talking about modern rules. We definitely have a bunch of stuff packed for you in the fall and in the new year. We're really looking forward to getting back to some more cons as both of our lives pending. The military being very busy in the last few months, not only ourselves but our nation. So it's been an interesting time, but we look forward to continue to kind of get back to the hobby when we can, to give us that peace of mind for nothing else. So, without mumbling on any longer,
is the quarantine board going to be on public display out there?
yeah. So it was at a modeling show for the week week and a half that I was there in downtown, and it was like 100 meters from the actual medieval arcade. So that was awesome. I got to go by it every day, and then. It was a really, really great experience. The French, these aren't huge towns. Carentan is not, Carentan, as it's said, is not a huge town. So it was great to just walk in the street, and a lot of the other guys were joshing with me like it was a local celebrity, because people would come up and be like, "Oh, you're the guy that built the model," because their news agency did like a story on it. But it's going to be at the mayor's office at City Hall, and kind of they're going to encase it in glass and put it up there. And so on one side of it, it says, gifted by Captain Matthew Doyle, the 1944 medieval arcades, and then on the other it says the same thing in French. And so just an awesome experience. Really enjoy Jean-Pierre, that mayor. I mean, been fantastic to me. It was so, just amazing. I could go on and on for days about that, but that's not what the episode's about.
But
The episode, great question though. Yeah, but you can see it at the City Hall.
I want to challenge anybody who's there. Grab yourself a selfie with it and send it to us. Let it post it up on the On Patrol Facebook page, because that would just be cool. People can go and see it.
Yeah, there's I believe that, so the City Hall has like a wedding room on the second floor. And I don't know where the mayor said he was eventually going to put it. I know that I think while they were going to put it in glass, it's going to be in his office. But hey, Jean-Pierre's a cool guy. Tell him you know me. Go in there, snap a selfie with Jean-Pierre and the model, and send it back to me. But great questions. So let's get back to what we're going to talk about in this episode. Get you back to some hopefully decent programming, where I say I completely agree 20 times in this episode. We'll put a ticker somewhere up. Not this time. Yeah. But so grab your spear, your shield, your musket, your machine gun, your flight jacket, your parachute, your flight panel board for your knee board, and let's run to the plains. The sirens are up, and let's head to the skies as we do our deep dive rules review into Blood Red Skies. Wyndehurst, I'll let you take it away with our first section of the review.
Thanks, Kentuckian. And as we like to remind everybody, if this is your first time listening to one of our deep dives, it's the same format as all the rest. So those who have, you'll be very familiar with it. But just a quick reminder, we've got 10 sections. We'll go through each section, and then we each score the sections with how we feel. It ranks out 0 from 10. Anything over a 5 is a positive review. Generally, we've always reviewed rules that we like, because why would we bring you a set of rules we don't like? But Kentuckian is been playing Blood Red Skies since it came out, pretty much, and I've been playing it. I had painted some models last year, but I've really only been playing it this year. So we're giving you two perspectives as somebody who's been with the game the whole time it's been around, and someone who's fresh into it. So keep that in mind with each of our opinions, because they are based very different perspectives. But our first category we always go through is presentation. So is it a book? Is it a PDF? How is it offered? How is it laid out? How does it look? Things like that. So if you're watching the video, Kentuckian just held up the Airstrike book. So there is a physical book. There's actually two physical books, the Airstrike and what's the bomber one called? Bomber Command?
I think so. Wing Commander,
Wing
Bomber
Commander.
Commander. I have it on PDF.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as Kentucky said, so there's two physical books. The Airstrike one contains the basic rules, it contains the McAlley rules, and it contains a whole lot of great optional advanced rules. The Wing Commander is a whole bunch more optional rules, adds bigger aircraft. There are PDFs of both of those. There's also a free PDF quick start guide, which is the basic rules. And then there's two free supplements, like campaign supplements. One for that came out for D-Day 75, and one for I think it's like the Desert War, basically North Africa, and Mediterranean. So yeah, there's a lot, and Kentucky and I are always saying it's great to have a PDF version, and they go one step above that, and they give you a free PDF for the quick rules. The hard book, though, the Airstrike, I think runs about $35 right now, and if you want everything, the Airstrike PDF I think is $16, and then of course you got the free set of rules. It looks almost identical to every other Warlords games that's come out in the last maybe 10 years. You've got beautiful double column, full color, a whole lot of illustrations. It's got a few diagrams, not as much as some of the other games, but it's a skirmish kind of level game, so it's not as complicated. It's got some charts, but it's not super crunchy. When you first look through it, it looks like, oh man, there's a lot of charts, but it's not really. It's not like you have to reference charts a whole lot. One of my favorite things that they've added, and I'm always complaining about this in games, is quick reference sheets. Do you have yours available, Kentuckian? You hold it up.
Yeah.
So if you get the starter set, which is about $100, it comes with two of these cardboard front and back quick reference sheets, and that's pretty much everything you need to play the base game. And those are great, and they're in the rule books as well, PDF, so you can print off that page. It does have an index, and yeah, it's a great looking set of rules as far as layout and color and information. So Kentucky, what were your thoughts on the layout of the book?
Good, good. Again, as Wyndehurst said, we've already kind of recorded this episode, but we ran into some difficulties. So I'm like, oh, I don't want to rehash, but a little bit. We're going to have to, obviously. But that's great. So the book I think is awesome. I'll say it's awesome. Not that 76 pages. Airstrike is what I'm kind of going to go off on the review because I think that's the base game. And just like he said, some of the early editions would come with the Battle of Britain. The outdated rules would have like the base game, and it's like 15 pages. Expanded rules was like 15 pages, and scenarios was like 15 pages. And that's kind of, you're getting that plus a lot more other things in Airstrike, and obviously they've had an errata and everything since. But I absolutely love it. The only I think it's great with the diagrams. It has actual models in there. We've looked at it, but it doesn't really have a lot of the pictures of like actual gameplay. But it'll have like diagrams, black and white, or just like pencil drawn diagrams of planes, like how they're interacting, or boom chits, or some 2-inch, like here's flak, going through a little bit of that with the actual chits. It has these great paintings
Yeah,
that you'll
great
see.
illustrations.
Great illustrations is really good in that. The one thing that I would say that it has a little bit less of that Warlord's normally known for is Warlord will just destroy their books with great painted models in there. And I don't mean destroy, but I mean just like it's all over the place. So here's a page with 3 painted models on there. I would say most other Warlord games rule sets, like there's a painted model on every page. And where it doesn't do that, it does the illustrations. So, huge fan of both. And then my only other thing to put out as far as like differences with other things I've seen from Warlord games is the history. Um, it has when it has the scenarios in the airstrike book, like it'll show you, hey, if you want to play this actual escort scenario, like here's a TO&E that will, this would be trying to replicate a 1940, 1944 battle, and here's the planes you would actually use, and it'll give you like the sit rep of what's going on. But it doesn't really go into, we talked about this with Bolt Action version 3. We talked about this with um,
Octoon
uh,
Panzer.
Hail Caesar, and Octoon Panzer, and some other ones. Like it goes into a deep amount of history, and some of those like 50 plus pages of a 170-page rule book is like, wow, that's dedicated a lot of time to the history of it. And I normally love that. And the reason I love that is almost not for me, but for people that are picking up historical minded games. I think, again, if you're not open to it or you're historical kind of interested, it's cool just to understand, like, hey, what's going on? And then people kind of get grounded in hey, this really happened, or this could have happened if we're playing a what if, and here's what was going on. I like that about historical wargaming rather than you know uh, people just having no idea. Because again, we've had whole episodes of why historical wargaming and stuff like that, but that's just a few of the examples I see it maybe deviate from the normal Warlord game standard. Um, Sections build on each other. Scenarios pretty easy. My only kind of other comment, a great set of rules, and we've played, Wyndehurst when we played Age of Hannibal, or we played other rule sets that are 20 pages long, or not too long. You're like, there's a few things that are connecting in sentences or paragraphs or in gameplay, where because it's such an active cat and mouse skirmish dogfight game in my mind, it's hard to make sure that you understand where they connect. Like there was the first handful of games I played of Blood Red Skies, like every number 3 went first before advantage, disadvantage, and neutral before I even really connected that. So I think there's a few things that aren't like highlighted in the rule book that you will learn them. And I think it's the very nature. We kept going through skirmish games, Saga, even we played Muskets and Tomahawks, where stuff is so interconnected. There's sometimes it's hard for a player to make sure that they're making all the right and appropriate connections. And when you skim it down with a short and concise rule book, some of those can be missed. But do love the examples, the written examples. An example. The written examples about multi-engine bombers. It was perfect because even though it didn't really have a graph to show you, like, hey, this is how it is, me and my buddy were playing kind of like a fantasy battle Britain game, and we were able to kind of read through, hey, this is what a flight of 20 engine bombers is. This is how many boom chits they really have to get. This is how they get boom chits. And it walked through like how it happened in order to kind of break up the flight. And that was awesome. So it really helped connect. But great things about it are it's short, it's concise, it's 76 pages. It's not a doctorate or a dissertation you're going to have to get in this thing. It is pretty thin, and that's what it's all about with this game, is getting into the fun. We'll talk about that later, but my knocks on it would be some of the connections between sections, and then maybe some other diagram, maybe some more diagrams for some of those connections to make them easier. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty well pleased. What about you, Wyndehurst? Any other like real highs from the book or real lows from it?
Yeah. So I'll also talk about my score, and then I'll ask you yours. So I gave it an 8.5, which is pretty good. But where I dinged it, there's one section, there's a mechanic, an optional mechanic. So I don't want to ding it too much for an optional mechanic, but you have cards that you can use. And I found the section on cards leaving me really kind of confused of how do I put the deck together and when do I use it, and if I've got 2 people, do we each have our own deck? I felt like that section could have been flowed better and maybe had some more examples. And then the other thing I'm going to ding it for is it's got all the aircraft lists and all their stats from MiG Alley. So that's Korean War jets. However, it doesn't have any aircraft lists and stats for any other aircraft in World War II. So you have to get either the decks of aircraft cards if you want to use your own models, or you have to buy the packs of models. And we've already said it's a fairly short book. They very easily could have added those in there, I think, and it would have been a nice thing. I think people still would have bought the cards because it's nice to have convenient reference cards, and the cards they make for it are quite nice. Um, so those were kind of the two areas that dinged it for me. So 8.5 is my score. What about you, Kentuckian?
Yeah, we're not acting surprised as we were on the first time we tried to film this episode because we know each other's scores for the most part. So I'm at an 8.5 as well, and the reason being is that we said 5 is like middle of the road for us, so don't expect it on like 100 rating scale at school, like where 60 is failing. Like 5 is still pretty good. It's average for us. 6 and above is above average. I put it at 8.5 because I do think what it does well, it does very well. It's short, concise, really intact, good book for not I would say it's in between a hardcover and a soft cover. Most people probably call it a soft cover, but it definitely holds up. And with the flaps and airstrike, it's got the other cards on there that you can use. But it makes it a little bit more able to manage. It's got beautiful illustrations, the diagrams. It doesn't kill you by charts, like Wyndehurst said. Again, illustrations are awesome, and I love painting models off of what tickles my fancy. And for it to be, if you even chop up airstrike into just sections, like you have the base rules without the cards, you can add the cards, expanded rules, you've got scenarios, you've got kind of some additional things in there with flak and a little bit of other stuff, and then the appendix, another quick sheet in the back. Like, yeah, I think what it does well, it does very well. And my nitpicky, on why it's not like a 9 or a 10 is I think just by the nature of some of these skirmish games, where how do you make the connections when everything is kind of interconnected? And could that be done any cleaner? I honestly don't even know if it could. It just might, I think that's just going to be a knock against how you connect the book. For me, I know for some people it probably flows really well together. For me and my dense Kentucky brain, I had some difficulties at moments. So looks like 8.5s across the board. Let's mosey on over and tip our wing to the next section, which is what is the rule set trying to achieve? And questions we've asked in the past when we've looked at this section are um, what is the goal? Is it more realistic? Is it tournament based? Is it fun? Who is the intended audience? Does it meet that goal? And what are the shortfalls in the goal? For me, I think I've played airplane games and just kind of anything like that, dogfighter or airplane games in the past. They normally really haven't gotten me. There's some movies that really stand out to me. Like 12 O'Clock High, Battle Britain, all of those things that can kind of like get you fired up and you're like, oh, I can paint this. And for me, for the Ultra, I had the privilege to play against some people who were in Army aviation for decades, really knew their stuff, and they enjoyed the game. But these are people that have played like Check Your Six or the 1946 rule set. I know it's a year after the war, but there's one for the East and one for the West theaters, and you're talking about like your rudder elevation, or you're talking about, hey, this is what I can do in the dive bombing, and then especially fighting in different battle spaces, that we'll see. I've never been that into air combat. Most of my air combat comes from some of those amazing games of like World War One combat, where it's still dogfighting. It's camels versus the Red Baron. It's kind of in that vein. So this one to me, if you do that, you distill down a 76-page rulebook. They're leaning towards fun. From what I know of the planes, and I would say I have a general knowledge of World War II aircraft and their uses, and what they're designed for, and then what I've picked up in multimedia, which is whatever books, Ospreys I've read, and those things. I do think it tends to be historical flavored, which I think is where most of Warlord games are at. And so, what is the goal? I think it's overall fun. You get a quick cat and mouse game. You can play a game, I think, especially if it's just like one flight against one flight. You can play a game in, like 30 minutes. You can play several games in 2 hours. Or we did a big escort mission and we were an hour and a half, me and John, and we were quoting Battle of Britain the whole time. They teach monkeys to fly and tally ho, red leader. So we had a lot of fun, but I think it's fun. The only thing I want to mention too is the tournament based out of this. I don't know if it was intended. I assume it was intended because if the points are equal and the rules are pretty well equal, and no, the people I've talked to, Rob Prince, shout out, Scott Anderson, shout out. Scott runs a tournament at Patton Museum every year. Rob is obviously him and his um, Italian biplanes are maniacally laughing somewhere because he wins NashCon and Scott's tournament. I think he's like a tournament champion right now. But they've told me, I was in a group chat with them as we were talking about these rules. I wanted to talk to some of the tournament players, and they were like, "There's really no meta. Everybody's kind of got a chance," which is another good like tip of the cap. If you can have a game kind of designed for fun, you get an even kill in the tournament. I think it's overall going to get you there with a lot of historical flavor, and you'll feel like you've got that cat and mouse of World War II. Shortfalls would be if you are a heavy hitter aviator, and you like playing tabletop aviation, you are not going to, I think, enjoy this game as much. If that is what gets you. Now, John, who played with me, is one of those, and he still is like, man, this game is just fun. Like he knows his stuff on aviation, John Purtle, and he had a blast, and I think it's got enough flavor. So those are my thoughts on what it's trying to achieve, and if it gets there or not. My knocks against it, and my things that I think it does real well. What about you, Wyndehurst?
Yeah, I agree a lot. So I had written down competitive realism, but not tourney. And I think Warlord likes to hedge their bets and design a lot of their games with a point system, which point system based games lend themselves to tournament play. But I think it's more in the vein of like Hail Caesar, which is like you could play it as a tournament, but I don't think it was designed for tournaments. Where Bolt Action feels like it's a bit more designed for tournaments, but like Kentuckian said, they did so well at balancing it that it's perfect for tournaments. But the rules don't feel like, oh, this is a tournament game. I'm going to be playing a bunch of unrealistic scenarios, things like that. I think the audience is, like Kentuckian said, casual historical players, people who don't play a whole lot of either other aerial games, which are, of most of the other aerial games that I'm aware of, with the exception of the only one I've ever played, and that's because most of the rest are very technical and can be a lot more complicated. So the only other one I played is Wings of War, Wings of Glory, which is also, I would say, fairly comparable in complexity level, but it's got its own mechanics that are different. And again, it's not designed for people who want technical, realistic games. So I don't think that was their audience. And I think they did a good job at that. Like, the game doesn't feel that way. However, and I will talk about this a little bit in the rules, I think the focus of the game is different maybe than other games. I think whereas like the game I've played before is more about, I'm going to get in a plane, fly around and shoot down enemy planes. It's really about flying around and shooting down enemies. I think the focus in Blood Red Skies is more about the importance of maneuver and position and advantage, and we'll talk about those mechanics. And so for me, that kind of goes a little bit into the shortfall because they have a really clever way for representing this, and we'll talk about this in rules and mechanics. But because that's the focus, it took me several games to wrap my head without anybody teaching me. Like, I was going into this cold, no tutorial videos or anything. I was like, I'm just going to take the rules, teach myself, and teach my kids. And so I found it took several games of, okay, I played it, I read the rules again, oh, I messed this up, because some of the things to me weren't necessarily intuitive because I came from another game. I think if you play with anybody, like if you were to play with Kentuckian or anyone who's played it before, or I think even I could teach it better now, that you would have a better experience going into it than I did. Or if you're coming to it cold, never having played any other aerial war game, I think it'll be a little bit easier for you to pick up just because you don't have other experiences kind of throwing you off, because it is fairly unique how they run some of their mechanics. So I think, go ahead.
Well, and just as a disclaimer for me, I don't feel I'm a crafty veteran, even though I've kind of been with BRS since the beginning. My I go in and out of BRS because I do think it's such a great palate cleanser game. And I'll get, just like everybody in the hobbyist, I'll get hooked to it. I'll game it pretty hard for a handful of months, and then I won't touch it for a while. And so even those kind of first games back with me playing with John or playing with some of the other guys I was doing pickup games with as we were doing this rules review, like it did take a second for it to come back. But and then especially we played a little bit more of the headier scenarios where you have to think a little bit about if you're laden with bombs and whatnot. So I co-sign kind of everything you said about that. I do think if you're into more intricate games, like there's going to be some pitfalls. But I just want to say, as like an example, I had somebody who's definitely into aviation and those types of games and understands, you know, your rudders, your flaps, and like how this can really just change the dynamic. And they still had a blast and enjoyed it. So, what's your overall score
Yeah, so actually I gave
for what is the
7.5.
rule set trying to 7.5.
Yeah, and
So,
and that's actually, I'm glad we did a second recording because I took some time to think about my first. And really, I think when I first scored this, I wasn't taking everything into account because it does achieve, I think, what it's aiming to well, because I still had fun even if I was struggling. And I played it with a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old, and they all had a blast. Like, also, they
yep.
didn't know, they didn't, I mean, there were some things in the mechanics we'll talk about that I think slowed the play down for them as kids, but they had fun regardless. So I
Yep.
think they did it. It's not, they didn't do it as well maybe for me as some other games, but I think 7.5 for me is pretty fair. What about you?
I'm gonna give it that 9. I'm gonna hold on my 9, and my 9 is because I just agree. I think fun is the overarching goal. I think it does it perfectly, and I think for those of us who air combat, we understand it's nuanced, and we understand the cat and mouse stuff, and how is that replicated on the tabletop in about 30 minutes, and you have a blast, and it seems to have the historical flavor and sense of the feel of it. It's some of the highest marks I can give a game, and in my mind, Andy Chambers, obviously, brilliant mind with wargaming, but I think he did a bang up job in getting this simple system with the feel of it and right with the right goal, and the fact that you can, whether you want to say the points are based on fairness or the idea to do the tournament, for you to be able to come at this game from many different avenues, whether you're a historical player, you're a tournament player, or whatever. It's kudos. So 9 and 7.5 from us. I'll let you take us on now to gatekeeping, our next waypoint in the air here.
All right, so our third one, gatekeeping. So again, for those who are new, we're talking about entry. What's the entry threshold? Are there mechanics or elements of the game that make it more difficult for people to get into it or might make it easier? So, with some games it might be special dice or battle boards or kind of tokens. Unfortunately, in my opinion, Blood Red Skies does have a lot of bespoke dials and measuring sticks and tokens. It does have on the surface what look like bespoke dice, but really they're just fancy D6s. So I'm not going to dig in for that. So they do have a lot of little things that go with it. The models, could you use other models, or what's the cost of the models? So kind of a breakdown of the cost. You can get a group of 6 regular fighters for $51, which sounds like a lot, but when you break it down, that's about $850 a fighter, and it's not just a bare model. It's a model plane with a movable plastic bespoke base that they do, with pilot skill level dials to go on each one, and a stat card for those planes. So you're actually getting a lot for that $850. But a single ace pilot, which comes with all the same stuff with a single plane and like a special pilot card, that can go up as much as $23. Yeah, it's kind of show you. 6 heavy fighters can be up as much as $61. 3 medium bombers, kind of large aircraft, $47, and so on. So they can seem a little bit expensive, and where that's not necessarily a problem in other games, I haven't found, and we'll talk about this in like third-party support, I haven't found any other real alternatives if you want to get these planes. And it's kind of hard to get all the elements of this game individually. Like when I first tried to get, I had to wait a while because I was originally going into Mig Alley because I already had a World War II and World War One air game, and I was like, oh man, Korean War jets, that's awesome. Um, but the dials and the measuring stick were out of stock, and the only other way to get them is in a starter kit. And so for a long time, that's why I didn't play it the last couple of years because I couldn't get my hands on that. And eventually I broke down and got the starter set, and I'm glad I did. So a positive thing, the starter set, I think when you first got in, Kentuckian, what was the starter set? It was Battle Britain.
Oh, Burton, this lovely box
Yeah.
over here behind me, out of print, not coming back. The only reason I haven't thrown the box away is I do enjoy looking at it when I'm about to, I imagine Michael Caine or somebody in that Spitfire just raking over the Messerschmitts.
Yeah. So over Kentuckian's other shoulder is the Battle Midway starter set box, which, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a starter set box be this complete with everything you need. It's got all the dials and all the tokens. It's got 6 Japanese planes, 6 American planes, cardboard tokens for torpedo bombers and light bombers, as well as ships, islands, and clouds. Um, the Midway one that I got doesn't come with a map, but like a sea map, but I think some of the older ones did. So really, it comes with everything you absolutely need for like $99 to play the game, except the cloth mat or the mat you want to play on, and that's pretty good for a starter set. A lot of times, starter sets kind of give you like a half experience, and then if you want the full experience, you have to get more stuff. But no, the starter sets is one thing incomplete. Um, so like some of our other under gate communities, like can you play with other models? Are they special sizes? This game is a little tricky for me in that unless you got a 3D printer, it's super easy. It does have a lot of books and a lot of supplements, but not in a prohibitive way. I think it makes the game more interesting because like if you're me and you're coming in fresh and you're like, well man, I'd really like to do the African theater, or I'd really like to do D-Day, or I'd really like to do the Pacific or European. It's got all those supplements already there for you. So for me coming into it fresh, I feel like I have the options now to do whatever theater I want to, which is really nice because my other war area game is all European theater, and now it's like, well, oh, sweet, Blood Red Skies can fill my Pacific theater niche, and I'll have that to play. So for me, it did a good job as far as giving me the options with supplements and rules. And I don't know if we mentioned earlier, but it does have a great errata that clears up almost every issue I came across in the core rules. Yeah, so those are kind of my thoughts. What are your thoughts on gatekeeping?
Um, for the bespoke stuff, like the die and everything else like that, and a company trying to protect its IP, so like somewhat charging a premium for some of those game pieces, not too upset about it. I don't think it's, like Saga in a sense of you need all these crazy things to do it. I think based off the starter set, like you said, it's something we really don't see war games companies do where a starter army, what is it, three-quarters of an army or something like that, or about, you're always going to add two or something like that, that we see most games do. I'm not saying all companies, but most games do. This one is very complete, both sides, everything you need to play, pop it out, and you're going for it. So I can't really hound them for that. And the planes being $8, especially when you put in the sheet of everything else, like not bad. They always do sales on their sites. You're talking like somewhere around $100 or something, anyways, for the starter set. Like it is very, as far as war games get into, getting it, having the whole thing cheap and easy, like you're there. And somebody had said, like, I've seen people complain about the aces before because they sell the little one individual plane like 20 some dollars or close to it. But it's got, a special stat card, some special rules for that ace, really, dives into the history of what they were trying to do. And they sell a variety of the aces, and they're really cool. They can upscale, I think, an average game to just to be like, oh, I'm this person, I'm in the Battle of Midway, and I've got my Dauntless or got whatever, or hey, I'm flying in my Spitfire over the Battle of Britain, and this is, trying to replicate that. I think that's really cool. So I'm not going to knock too much on the gatekeeping mechanics. I don't think it's out there too crazy. And to Wyndehurst's point is the 3D printing. There's a lot of people, and we'll get into kind of the community and stuff on, uh, what they offer and what they can give you. Just to mention, kind of, you got the Battle Britain starter set that's not coming back. That was the initial release. You have the Airstrike book is kind of came right after that. You had Big Red Skies. Some of you might remember that from seeing the boxes at conventions. John Russell playing it a lot. It was the 172nd Airfix planes. I do not believe it's still out there. I'm not quite sure. And then you have the Midway starter set kind of released around the Midway movie. So Warlord kind of capturing on that PR. And then the fifth release was Wing Commander, that added new scenarios, new eras for early 60s jets, master aircraft lists with stats. And I will give, Brett and Steve a shout out from Lead Pursuit Podcast. They were the ones that had a lot to do with that campaign system that's featured in there. And I've never played the campaign. I don't attest to, but I've thumbed through it. And I thought that was a really cool kind of aspect. Sometimes linking these games together, especially if you're playing with a club, is pretty cool. So as far as gatekeeping, I can't really knock them on it. I think I think they do a good job of kind of tallying it, keeping it together, and making sure that it's one of the cheapest war games to get into. Starter sets most complete, and then the add-ons. You can kind of go the world is your oyster, 30 to 60 bucks. Getting another flight, whether you're buying from Warlord or 3D printing them, and the cards are out there. So I'm I'm a huge fan. They're going to get a decent score from me in this, and I'm going to give them an 8 for gatekeeping because I think it's done at an appropriate level. I don't feel like I'm paying through the nose for what is them protecting their IP and at least trying to make a dollar after having this great rule set by Andy. So I'm going to put it at an 8. What about you, Wyndehurst?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I am gonna ding a little bit harder. So for me, it's a 6.5 on gatekeeping, and that's predominantly because there aren't really a lot of options out there if you want to use alternative planes, and I had the issue where it's like if you don't want the midway set, like if you just have no interest in the Pacific Theater, if they have one thing out of stock on the site, you just can't get enough stuff to play. And I think that's kind of a weak spot because I think if they had just like an accessory set, like here's all the accessories,
I think I thought they did. I know they sell the sprues and stuff
they only sell the sprue
that you can.
with the measuring sticks and the turn dial, but none of the other
Yep.
tokens or anything. And I
Yeah.
just, it works because they generally, even though the game's been out a while and they haven't really added too much to it, it's generally everything is in stock. So I don't think it will prevent anyone necessarily. I just got unlucky, but to me, it is risky in the long-term life of the game. If Warlord decides, hey, we're not going to can really continue it that much, we'll keep the PDFs up, but once we're out of stock, we're out of stock. You're kind of out of luck unless people start providing third-party accessories. And that's what we've reviewed games, or we've looked at games that have been out for a long time. I mean, think Muskets and Tomahawks. Before second edition came out, it was so hard to find the cards for that game. And I just worry that that could happen to Blood Red Skies. So I am going to ding them because I think that's a huge vulnerability for the long-term life of the game. But the
Yeah.
starter set, if you're willing to get it, is amazing, one of the best I've ever seen. And I do not think the planes themselves are overpriced.
Well, especially I think it would be a good idea of Warlord to come out with a Western theater starter box. And I understand the tactical decision to do Pacific because there is so much aerial combat in the Pacific, especially with all the island hopping and stuff. So it makes sense. But man, if they just revived that Battle of Britain set, I think it would be worth it as well. But I mean, the company has to make money, and you know we'll see. But as far as the gatekeeping, I still fair scores. I understand your points. I'm sure a decent amount of listeners do too. But um, to me, I'm really pitting it up against war games out there that I've seen. And GW being the bad beast in the corner, and kind of all the other historical wargamings like Saga and all these things that you have to have a million battle boards or dice for different armies to understand them. Like man, this is good in my mind. So moving on swiftly to our next section, playability. So how long before you have the system, 1 to 2 turns or 1 to 2 games? Can you finish the game in 1 to 2 hours, a day, a weekend? Long setup, tear down, putting models out. Does the result normally fit the game or desired achievement? For me, its playability is up there as well. And I talked to a lot of the community while I was out there, and I talked to Steve and Rob, or Scott and Rob, and I talked to Doug Doug is. We'll talk more about Doug in the community. Doug, I love you. That man is a treasure. He's a national treasure of the North American wargaming hobby. If you haven't met Doug Glover, please go up to him. But uh, one of the things that we were talking about, and I think goes to Wyndehurst's points, Doug wrote me this quote, and I just have to read it on air now. Every 2 or 3 convention appearances, I get one grognard who wants to come up to me and complain about the advantage mechanic. I stare at them as if I really care about their rant, and then tell them, cool, then don't play Blood Red Skies. It doesn't sound like the game for you. That is pure Doug, but it's Doug is a loving person, and his next comment is, "What I have never had in a group of new players sit down and 30 minutes later say, can you go over that advantage mechanic again? Everyone stumbles with it in a different way at first, but after your first 3 turns or so, most get the basic mechanic and its impact on gameplay." And so there are some things I think that as you muddle through, like I told you, I kind of understood the advantage earlier on, but the thing that I had trouble with was, you know, not all 3 starting when I just should have read better. Like reading is hard. Hashtag.
Army.
But yeah, army. But the I sent Wyndehurst that aerosol video earlier, and they're like, why is the 101st still called the Airborne Division? They're like, whoa, we don't pay you to think, we pay you to army. So keep going on in armying. And so, but to get to that, like, I think you're going to get this game if you're playing with a veteran. Again, don't consider myself probably like one of these veterans out there. I'd say I'm moderate, I'm novice maybe.
Compared to me.
Um, Compared to you maybe, but the like even when I was coming back to the rule set, normally if I can get 1 or 2 games in, I'm caught back up. But I think if you have somebody leading you, if I'm leading myself or leading a newbie, I think that's what it's like. A few turns, a handful of turns, I can get back caught up. But if it's somebody who's a veteran, like if you got Doug at your table, like you will get it down in a turn or two. And I think most people will get it down in a turn or two. Most people, will like YouTube a game before they play it anyways to do a walkthrough. I think that's a lot of great things that the wargaming on YouTube they do is they do playthroughs. And you watch one of those, like they're not long games. Like you can get a dogfight, a furball in like 30 minutes and you've got it and you're like, wow, this is really, and I think that's the way to escalate it is starting with the base rules, then adding the cards, then, playing a scenario. And that's the transition you could go through. You will get this game down, I think, in 1 to 2 turns overall. Yes, you can finish a game in 1 to 2 hours. It's not going to be a day or a weekender. You can play a campaign probably in a weekender. Long setup and tear down? No. My cigar box battle mat, shout out to Corey. Throw it out there, flip it out, put the planes on their stands. Hardest thing to set up is putting the right pilot skill on its stand. And then boom, you got 6, 12 planes or whatever aside. Like you're going to set this game up in maybe 10 minutes. And that's if you stop and bullshit with somebody for 5. So like I think you'll be fine. And then does the result normally fit the game? Um, Doug gave me a good comment for that. I think it fits for me. And I'll read Doug's comment, after I say this. I think it's the nail biter um, dogfight cat and mouse. And I like that tension. Like that's what I see out of aerial combat is like, oh, I'm trying to hold on to the stick. I'm trying to do some turns and go to advantage and neutral and disadvantage. And I'm trying to get a wingman to get on this guy's tail. And that's what I really want out of an airplane game. And it gives that for me. Um, Doug gave me a comment. He said, I'll just throw this out there for historicity of the game, if that is a word. You can get wildly swingy results based on the rolls and the way aircraft and ground target ships interact. Some players have done a great job of backwards planning scenarios odds-wise to figure out how many aircraft they need across the target on an average die to achieve the historical output. Not a bad way to do business, but a lot of work for a pickup game. So I think there is some... John brought up a point where the plunging fire that you could have from having the different elevations into the bombers would change possibly, and that's how planes might attack said bombers if you're trying to avoid being in the box of a bomber's crossfire or anything. And so I think there's some things there's to add, but I would say the desired results, especially out of the dogfights that I've seen with Corsairs and Zeros, Wildcats, whatever it is, Messerschmitts and Spitfires, like they match. Like there's every aircraft has its little novice thing that it can do, kind of as an ode to their aircraft, and then you're still getting this like um, cat and mouse like feel. So to me, playability super high. What are your thoughts, Wyndehurst?
Yeah, I do agree that it is a super fast play game compared to a lot of other games. It is ridiculously fast to set up and tear down. Like I was saying, I've got just the starter set really done, and everything fits in the box except the mat. And you get a paper mat. I think you've got a paper mat with one of them. You could that could go in there too. So it is really quick. That's high marks for both those categories. Um, as far as how long it takes to play, I kind of said this earlier. For me, I was trying to get up to the point where I was using the cards. And there were some of the mechanics we'll talk about in the next section that I just kind of hadn't. I was slow to wrap my head around, and so it took me several games. But that was again self-teaching and trying just to be like, if I'm just got the rules and the rules I read, what can I do? So your mileage will probably vary. Does the result fit the game or desired achievement? How does it kind of feel? It kind of missed the mark a little bit for me, but I don't think I went into it initially understanding what their goal was. My experience and what I was expecting is like, okay, I'm going to fly around and I'm going to shoot down enemy planes. So my focus is on shooting down and damaging the enemy plane. But that's not, and we'll talk about this more in the next section, but that's not really, like Kentuckian said it, the tension of the dog and mouse. It's a lot more about how you maneuver, and even your shooting is more about putting at them at a disadvantage until you can finally get them in the weakest position where, okay, I got you in my sights, dead to rights, you're gone. And so for me, the shooting really felt under effective. Some of the dice rolls it's only ever a spade or a six essentially to get a hit. So some of the odds felt really long, like, man, what's the point in taking the shot? And when I was playing with my kids, I heard that a lot from them. And I was like, well, you're rolling a lot of dice. Roll it anyway, because all you need is one. You just need one six to make it, a hit. But because it factors more into the advantage-disadvantage system, sometimes it felt less rewarding. But that's because, again, we were going into the mindset of, I want to damage and shoot down enemy planes, where the game's kind of more about the whole battle and your whole wing or section of aircraft outmaneuvering the enemy until either you can drive them out of the airspace or you bring them down. And so the focus is just, you have to understand, what the game's trying to accomplish and what they're trying to achieve. So I do think they accomplished it and achieved it, but it's what you want out of it. So for me, the playability, the desired end result was a little bit lower.
What do you have?
What about scores? 7.5.
Yeah,
So still pretty good, but
7.
just my experience was not exactly what I was going into it looking for.
And I'm going to give them an 8.5. And my thought with that too is, back to your point, like my counterpoint for that, right? Me and Wyndehurst, somebody made up a joke like we rarely disagree. They haven't seen us talk in private, right? When we're shouting at each other nose to nose. No, I'm kidding. But in my mind, that is what gives you a really good game, is the tension, right? If you go out there and it's, planes obviously blew up off first lucky strafes, right? Going head to head long against each other. Um, Difficult to get that in this game. And the sense is, the survivability is, you have actions to outmaneuver, and we'll get into that a little bit. But I think it adds a little bit to the game, but you're trying to get that leg up. So whether you're spraying somebody, getting boom chits on them, getting that disadvantage, it's like, how do you get this leg up? And then how are you seeing the board to have these planes interact? Really good stuff. But overall, I think good scores. Well, I'll kick it back to you for our next section, which I think we'll talk a lot about this more.
Yep. So section 5 is rules, mechanics, and nuances. So first off, is it simple or complex? We've already kind of said this. It's a simple game. I mean, I think Wings of War, Wings of Glory could be more complex even than Blood Red Skies can be. it's just it is a game, and we'll talk. The main mechanic for friction and everything is different, and no one ever's done it. So the biggest accomplishment I think they pulled off with Blood Red Skies is how do you avoid doing height difference with because like I've never played really or Wings of War with the elevation pegs because it's so fiddly and it's really complicated when it's like, oh, well, I'm this many pegs higher than you for shooting. And so a lot of games struggle with that. And you look at a lot of games and they can be really ugly because they've got these big long poles with airplanes. And it's like, all right, well, you're not playing the game because it's pretty, but you want a more realistic, complex game. So they managed to make Blood Red Skies simple, but the advantage disadvantage system kind of it encapsulates the altitude. It encapsulates your positioning and stuff like that in a very simple way. And even when you look at it, like, man, these planes are going to fall over because it's like disadvantage here or advantage here. And you can get weights for them, like if you're using metal planes, but I didn't need to use them. It worked great, from a functionality. So it's not a crunchy set of rules. It's game-changing mechanic that I've never seen anyone else do is that advantage system, which I think is really brilliant. Where the rules break down a little bit for me is in, and I kind of said this, is with the shooting. For me, it's because it feels like you really only ever take shots if you're right on their tail, and which might be historically more accurate than other games. So other games like, well, as long as you're in my front arc, I can shoot you. And that's probably less accurate. So they are a little bit more realistic in that sense. But again, it's just kind of that's one of the things that it took me a couple games to kind of make sure I had the understanding of, as well as the card mechanic. And I think the cards are great. I just don't think the rules explain them clearly enough to me where I really fully understood how they should work. But I think that advantage system it's a unique thing, and I think that's also where you get your friction, because the way the friction works, there are a lot of other dogfight games, both space and realistic, historical, where it's everyone has an initiative level, and either we move from lowest initiative to highest initiative, and you shoot from the reverse or something like that. But every aircraft will have a pilot skill level, and it's your advantage planes go first from highest skill to lowest, then your neutral planes highest to lowest, and then your disadvantage highest to lowest. And that was pretty clever, and I think that added a lot of tension because you're thinking, okay, how important is it that I go in the sequence? You might decide, well, it's more important that I maneuver here, and to gain advantage versus trying to maneuver to get a shot because I might be a target this next round. So I think it is a very clever, well done friction without repeating what everyone else has done. So yeah, I only had the two areas for where they kind of broke down, but otherwise I thought it was pretty good. What about you, Kentuckian?
I see the friction. Doug gave me another comment on this, on where he sees the friction. I see the friction. I totally agree with you. And I think that's the noviceness of me into BRS is I think it's the advantage system and capturing that. All of these charts and tables that are used in all these different rule sets, like check your six and that stuff, to say it's these three things. And here's how you can make yourself advantaged. Here's how you can make somebody disadvantaged by outmaneuvering them, or neutral. And you're talking about like 4 iterations in a turn. When you've activated your plane, you shoot, you burn advantage, you maneuver, you dive, you move, and then you turn up to 45 degrees, and then your pilot action. You shoot, you outmaneuver, you climb. And that's what your plane does. And it's the same thing with like why I think bolt action is, like you do 6 things. Like this is what the die says you can do. You can do these 6 things. And it's like, wow, that doesn't seem complex, but I can do so much in that 6. And it's the same with this game, in these 4 iterative periods in your activation. So I think it does it seamlessly. It's perfect. I don't have to read a dissertation when I'm like, hey man, I really, I just saw Battle of Britain on TV, or I've seen Red Tails or something, and that's piqued my aviation interest again. And so let's go get some games in. And even to what you talked about in playability, when I'm playing with my 3 and 5-year-old and they're having their cackling because they're shooting me down, like it is super simple. It is super simple. One of the things that Doug told me is he said the biggest element of friction is obviously via the card mechanics, which is not apparent to me. And I have to say, I haven't played tournaments. And he says theater cards provide a first layer of introducing friction by modifying the rules or adding or removing modifiers. Like we were playing the Battle of Britain, and like the British have radar, and you get some buffs and nerfs to the Germans for that. Doctrine and Chait cards add this by several of them, and what we call, denial list cards, in that they aren't giving you your ability, but rather are shutting off one of your opponents. Like Great Climb is an example, or the tight turn, like the Brits can use in their move. Like, hey, you can make this turn, and that is a really, I think some of the best rule sets out there. As generic as people like to think, it adds so much more depth. It's just a handful of cards, but hey, our planes move 7 speed, and the Spitfire's 2 kilometers faster, so it goes first. It'll win the whatever kilometers faster, it'll win first. And then now you add these one or two cards, and it's like, okay, this isn't as dense as like a Saga battle board, where you have to think too much. It's like harken back to bolt action. Like you have these two or three special rules that you can be like, hey, Spitfires can do this, Messerschmitts can do this. Like this is something I have to think about with this opponent. And then you start layering that on top of each other, and you're using clouds. I had a buddy Mike in North Carolina we all kind of got into BRS back then at the same time, and then Mike, just like really dove in, I think, with both feet. And I'm the one that's barely adding my cards to the game. Like still don't feel comfortable. Like, am I using this right? And Mike's over there, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna dive, go over here, land in this cloud, go to neutral. My last action is gonna climb. I'm in your rear, and it's like, oh my god, like that's a lot of depth and coolness to the game that you can, get some of this tension from. So, I again, I think it is. I think any game company that can do that, you obviously, it's even basic economics. You have to go for the mass. All right. There's a lot of things in ancient rule sets that I want to see, that I, deep dive on, or World War II rule sets that I deep dive on, and I'm like, oh, I want to recreate that scenario, or kind of that. This is actually what they had as far as a weapon system, and I don't think I'm anywhere near there with aviation combat in World War II, but I have a base understanding, a general understanding, and man, this game I feel like gets me up to snuff from the general knowledge that I have, and how planes, over a Yak versus a Messerschmitt, or how these planes fought a Focke-Wulf, and it gives you that tension very quick, very easy to get a good game. So I'm there. I do think, as far as the friction and the breakdown, I think the cards could be up there. Like if you use them correctly, you're, Morpheus, or the chosen one. And if they can be a trap for the unwary. And I think most pickup games I've played, like me and John playing here several times, and then seeing that there's sometimes where it's like, oh, I forgot to play a card. And John, I had that British card that removes my first chit. I almost lost the game, and he's like, "Oh, play that card." Like he's looking at my cards across I'm just leaving them on the edge, and I'm like, "Oh, geez, I totally forgot these were in my hand." So yeah, I think the mechanics awesome. Like to capture 50 pages in these denser rule books, in a three-tier system. But I do think the knock is going to be that, most people that are real deep into this aviation combat may or may not like it. John did, and I consider him to be, pretty subject matter expert on aviation combat. But then my last thing is, I think the cards, play a couple of games. If you're Blood Red Skies curious, play a couple of games without the cards to kind of go off a base, and then once you feel like you have the base rules down, like add the cards. And I think you'll get more reward, feeling out of it. But it can be a trap for the unwary. So what are you scoring rules mechanics?
7.5, and the one big thing I ding it for that I kind of didn't say earlier is the moving mechanic. I just don't like. I'm not. I'm not saying it's bad. It's fiddly for me, and I not only the way they use the measuring sticks and the turning dial, but I don't like the restriction. I don't feel like my aircraft is as maneuverable because it's like straight line, turn. Whereas I kind of feel like I ought to be able to move and turn and move and stuff, and you can kind of do that, but it's like you have to spend like extra actions and stuff, or you need special aircraft who can do it. And I don't know. I didn't care for the moving mechanic very much. I don't think.
It can be a bit fiddly,
Yeah.
to your point. Like where you're moving it across and then you're like, oh, did I move 6 or 7? And if somebody bumps it, and especially when you get in a big fur ball and you're like, you can't land on the plane's base, like, like I did that almost once to John or twice. And so it's like that can be a little bit tight,
Yeah.
especially if you have, like full wings wrapped up together. But
Right, and it's not like
I
a normal war game where it's like maybe measuring stick. I can just hold this over in the air because the game, to play it as rules as written, it wants you to be very precise in your movement, and even your precise lining up if you're like tailing an aircraft or not. And in a very friendly game, it doesn't matter. Like playing with my kids, it did not matter, but it was enough where I was like, I'm just not crazy about
I
how this
didn't
works.
and that may be the community. It's something that Rob and Scott didn't bring up to me, and I haven't heard Doug say it. Like you're always going to have elastic rulers, especially if you're talking tournament. But that's something I haven't even really seen as far as a gripe or anything. So
At
I don't
least
know.
for
There's some
practice.
things I'm sure that always have to stay friendly. But 8 and a 7.5 out of us, that's awesome. So I'll dip into the next the community,
Okay.
and so opponents, player, community. So our basic questions again, we ask every rule set. You guys are listening to our categories as always. If I pick up this game, will I find a local opponent? Are there conventions that support this game near me? Are there local clubs that support the system? Do people house rule the system? If so, is it the same game with those rules? If I pick up this game, will I find a local opponent? This is one of those games. I've always said that about skirmish games, but this is one of those games. If you pick up the box, I guarantee you, if you tabletop wargame in any community, you will find somebody that will tabletop wargame with you on this. And I mean, you'll lead the pack because like it's so easy, I think, to learn is kind of what we said. Like even the hangups that me and Wyndehurst both said about it, and that's just our own incompetence probably. Like I think you'll people will find this fun. The conventions around me here in the southeast, Midwest a little bit, there's tournaments, at NashCon, there's tournaments up in, at Fort Knox around it. I know there's a decent amount going on in places. I've seen stuff out on the West Coast. So I think it's gamed out there. And then, there are local clubs that support it. This is one where it's true of every skirmish game. But out of all the skirmish games we've reviewed, I think this is one where you will have no problem. This requires very little, like if you get the midway box and you just do blue and white for zeros, and the Americans, like, you do blue them and white for the zeros, like you'll have a game. And I do think if there's any historical minded gamers out there, you'll get it. A kind of story I didn't even know until today. We have a local guy around here, awesome Dave Clapper, huge in Napoleonics. He kind of got me back into it on the tail end of my time here. And Dave, we've never really, he's always said he had Blood Red Skies. And then John was hosting a Yamamoto assassination scenario with like 16 lightnings versus the two Bettys and the zeros today. And it was really cool at the game store. And Dave, I was like, yeah, Dave, you play this? Like David talked about it. And then Dave pulls out 4 tackle boxes of like Germans, Russians, Brits, Americans, and he has all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we never knew. Like we were always playing other games and stuff like that. And so it was really cool. I think there are probably some closet BRS people that are out there on as far as opponents and player community. I have to say, and this is where I'll plug Doug even more. Um, Doug gave me the quote is perhaps you don't know this, Matthew, but I am a big deal. And I agree with that. I think Doug was trying to be facetious, but Lead Pursuit podcast is awesome. I think Doug has the right personality. They are a wiry bunch of gents over there. And I highly recommend anybody to listen to that podcast. It's funny for the jokes alone and for just the comments and ripping on everybody and each other. And so Doug brought up some good points that I kind of want to mention now, and where he has been. I think if you listen to one of their earlier episodes, they talk about going to Adepticon to play in the tournament, a different game system tournament, and then they were there at the release of BRS, and they kind of just like got him hook, line, and sinker. And Doug has obviously some aviation experience. I believe he's the guy that sat in the Wizzo in the back of the Hornet. Not quite Doug, I apologize. You're the guy in the back, whatever
It
you
would be the
do,
Wizzo.
right? Whether you're doing seed,
If
whether you're
you're a
doing
Florida
seed or
community,
whatever.
I can tell you.
So one of those support guys that actually gets to ride in the plane. So he says, no, seriously, finding opponents is always hard. So Lead Pursuit tries to push out to conventions across the U.S. and are always looking for BRS players to help us by hosting tournaments, narrative games, etc., with the overarching goal of growing the community. I often tell the story of being frustrated at NashCon one year for how many people said, "Oh, you're the Lead Pursuit podcast guys. Yeah, we love playing BRS in our friendly local gaming store, home group, War Game Dungeon, but I want to play other games while I'm here, so we don't play all the time." And I think that's true of what I've seen. And that's probably a knock against BRS for the cons. I have seen some scenarios at cons and everything, and I've seen the tournaments, and I think Doug does an amazing job out there beating the horn on it. To just try to beating the drum to get the community up. And I will say, Doug and the Lead Pursuit guys, as dastardly as they may seem, I think Doug's an awesome human being. But I called when I was going into the fall, when the division was on the immediate response force, and stuff was popping off in the Middle East. I called Doug before all that happened, and I wanted to run my first BRS tournament, and there were enough between the guys in Nashville, the guys local, and the guys towards Louisville and Fort Knox that I thought we could do pretty well as just an off kind of cycle tournament to host. And I called Doug, messaged him. I knew Doug from previous interactions, and Doug's like, "Matt, yeah, call me tomorrow." And we talked for 30 minutes or something, an hour. He listened to all my questions. He walked me through that community. I think the backbone of the BRS community is Lead Pursuit, and so highly recommend if you're still interested in this game and those things, check them out, check Doug out, message those cats. Those are awesome individuals. So top marks, from that. But I talked a little bit about the pitfalls of what some people's opinions are, why they might not play it at cons, or everything else. What about you, Wyndehurst?
Yeah, so my experience was totally different. In a lot of ways. So I'm coming at this game after it's been out for quite a while. It came out in the
2018 to
yeah
now.
yeah. So for a war game, we've reviewed war games that have been out longer, and we've reviewed war games that are like fresh out on the press. Um, I in the last 3 years in the UK, I never saw it. I never saw it at any of the smaller conventions I went to. I never saw it at Salute. I kind of reached out to some of the local clubs saying because I knew we were going to want to do this episode, and I want to give it a try. And I never really got a whole lot of bites for people. I was like, "Oh yeah, I want to play that with you." Um, that being said, I do think if you have it and this is the game you want to play for air combat, you can easily get people into it. You know, with a lot of games, they just have to have an interest. If it's like they like this Midway movie, and it's like, hey, well, you want to try a World War II air game? I've got the thing for you. Or if you want to try Meg Alley. Kentuckian, though, said two words that I think are the reason why I haven't seen it played very much in the UK. You said there's probably a lot of closet players. I think there's a lot of people who have played this and have it when it came out and Warlord was pushing it heavily, who have moved on to other things. And then you mentioned it's a good palate cleanser. So I think a lot of those people, when they feel the itch for an air combat game, they bring out Blood Red Skies and they play a couple games and they get that fix, and then it probably goes away. That, I think, is my experience in the UK. And I think the people who are diehard aerial combat gamers, they want the more realistic, crunchy game, and this is not the game for them. So those are the people who, the people who like Napoleonics, who are like mono game players. This is not probably the game for most of them, because they want something more crunchy, more realistic. So I think that's why you might not see it very much in other places. I think because there are people like Doug in the US who, this is what they love. They're pushing it, and they're making it more alive here than I was seeing it overseas. But it is such a simple game that if it's a game you love, you're not going to have any issues teaching people how to play it and finding people to play. You just got to be the advocate for it. You're probably not going to have people say, hey, I would love to play this game. Do you want to play this game? Well, hey, I happen to have it. You're going to be the ones like, hey, you want to try an air game, a World War II air game? I've got a game for you to try. And I think most war gamers, because it's so simple, because I even, approached other gamers, seasoned gamers, and like, man, I don't have the brain space for another rule set. And to be able to say, don't worry about it. You don't have to memorize anything. The game's simple enough that I can run you through it and you're going to have a fun time. We're both going to have a fun time. And then you can brain dump all the rules afterward because it really is that simple if you're playing with somebody who knows what they're doing. So I think it's easy to create players, but from my experience, it was harder to find players. My score reflects that. So I gave him a 6. I think I gave him an up, not a 5 or lower, because I think you can easily make players, as Doug has shown. If you want to promote it and push it, you're going to find people willing to play. But I don't think you're going to walk into most stores, other places, and find people just having it out playing it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it an 8, and I'm gonna give it high, and I'm gonna say without Lead Pursuit podcast, it's probably a 5. I'm gonna say Lead Pursuit podcast does most of the heavy lifting for the community. They are a staple, unlike I have seen. Like, there's so many bolt action podcasts out there now. It's hard to say which ones like lifting the community. The juggernauts, are doing all their stuff, those guys. But the Lead Pursuit is probably, they're what he told you, Doug, with Brett and them doing the campaign system. Like, they are doing a lot of heavy lifting to be as approachable and as open they are at cons, and to just be about, I think, those guys underline bluff, have fun. Like, they are going to have fun. They are they enjoy competitive gaming systems and the historical flavor of it, and they are doing most of the heavy lifting. So I think it's a community 8 to 6. That makes sense. And I the only reason is because I would give it the 8 is I've listened to them even when they were first coming out. And yeah, I think they're doing most of the heavy lifting for the community. But you might find a Dave Clapper like I did, where he's got 700 planes and 4 tackle boxes at your store, and I think hopefully you can find it. Definitely, we'll talk a little bit in our final scores, but I think it's out there more than we know. I'll say that even. So I'll kick it back to you for support from publisher, creator, and company.
Yeah, so when we talked a little offline, Doug, I know we haven't talked, we haven't met. Please don't murder me for my thoughts on this. Again, like I said in the beginning, I am coming at this game fresh after it's been out for quite a while. So I'm seeing everything there is. I didn't have to live through the growth and development of the game. So as somebody who's coming to this game, if you go to Warlord, you'll see that there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of aircraft. It's all almost 99% of it is in stock. There's several rule books and supplements, and there's not a whole lot of like first, second, third. They're not on like 5th edition. So when you look at it, when we're talking about support, we're saying like, do they provide updates and erratas regularly? Now the errata, the last was published in October 2023, which is a couple years ago. But from my experience in the rules, it didn't seem like the errata was missing anything. So from my perspective, that's up to date and current and covers everything that's relevant. There's a lot of supplements, like we've talked about, that give you a lot of options. It was the Meg Alley supplement that actually originally drew me to Blood Red Skies as a game. So looking at it, it's like, wow, there's a lot of options. Do these changes and these updates keep the game fresh? Where we've seen in other games, it's like, man, are you really need another edition, or you just want people to buy more stuff? You see that a lot in games like 40K. I'm not saying that's why they're doing it, but it certainly seems like that's why they're doing it. They're on like 10th edition or something, and it didn't seem like that for this game. And it seemed like all the supplements added nice things. Talking to Kentuckian, when the starter set had the base rules and you had all these small rules, now you have the Airstrike compendium and the other compendium, and Airstrike really has everything you need in it. So from my perspective, it looks like the publisher has done a really good job supporting the game. And when we get to scores, my score is going to reflect that. Kentuckian, as somebody who went through the life of the game, what are your thoughts on how Warlord supported this game?
I think you can sum up a lot of Lead Pursuit podcast episodes with frustration. I think would be a nice word. I'd like to see what, if Doug would say anything else on top of that. He wrote me a comment. He said, it's a controversial topic. That's how he starts. He said, Andy Chambers, the man, the myth, the legend behind the rule set, is committed to keeping the game in print and is involved in the community quite often. Warlord has a lot of business decisions on their plate right now, and BRS isn't one of the top money makers. So we have seen reduced support for the game. No new aircraft models releases in the last 2 years. Italians were the last ones. Projects that were nearly complete a few years ago have not moved forward to production, but they have been committed to keeping the aircraft rules, starter sets in stock, but realize this could change, kind of a drop of a hat or a whim of new management and anything else like that. And so economics could, find its kind of way into this, landscape, as it should to some degree, right? Regardless,
Yeah, they are business.
with you're talking about a hobby and a company. So I don't really negate it too much for that, but I would say all of that is kind of true. I don't really have anything to add. Wings of Glory and that those games that have been like out of print or maybe coming back, and then the World War II set. Wyndehurst was able to give me the World War II set, and some of these games that have gone in and out. I don't ever see, because of the community that Lead Pursuit has developed. I don't ever see it, go in the way of the dodo. I don't even know if Warlord shut it off, and let's say they gave it to Skytrex or something else, like they did with Cruel Seas. I still think you'd have it there. The Blood Red Skies Ready Room has a decent amount of people on it. The Alternative Room has a decent amount of people on it. Like, I think it's enough there, and it's a great fun game. Like, I don't know. I don't even see if they attempted to kill it, could it kill it? Because it's out there and people would have it. And if it's out of print or out of production, like the piracy community, I think would take over, and I'd hope it would, just because it is such a fun game. So my score, without you giving yours, um, I'm gonna give it a 6, just because I think Doug puts a nice little bow on it, and I'm echoing his comments. No new planes for 2 years and stuff with the Italians, that Rob Prince obviously loves. I think there's some issue with that now, but this is World War II, and the joke that we always say is like, hey, you're gonna errata the Tiger. Like, how are you going to do that? Besides Tiger Fear, maybe that was a bad tank example. Like the Sherman, like it has a 75 millimeter gun. Like whatever it is in your rule set, that stays. So if you've designed most of these planes, they're out there. But I know people like John, when he does the Yamamoto assassination scenario, like the Bettys, like how do you get some of these planes that they don't make, or that you have to 3D print and then get on stands? So that's kind of a thought. But I still think 6. It's not anywhere near where I want it be, but this 6 I understand, because when your starter set is so cheap, the planes are so cheap, and you're talking about, multi, thousands, hundred thousands, millions dollars and pounds, that Warlord does, being one of the largest wargaming companies out there, still playing second fiddle to GW. You gotta go with the money. So it makes sense to me, but it's a begrudgingly 6. What about you, Winhurst?
I gave it a 9, because of what it appeared to me. And again, you know, I hadn't been in there the whole time to see it. You make some good comments. And where I dinged it for gatekeeping, that could hurt it in the long run, and that's why I dinged it. If they had more generic planes, or if the rules had, because they have the PDF. If the PDF rules had all the stats for the planes, this game could live for as long as we have digital records, because as long as you have the PDF available, you could go get your own planes. If they didn't have bespoke measuring sticks and stuff, it's like all I need is the PDF rules, and I could get everything else myself. So
Well, they're in the rules, so I guess you could cut them out, like muskets and tomahawks or
do they
some of those
have
rule books.
the movement markers and stuff in the rules? I don't.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna go to the back here. I'm pretty sure I saw them in something.
But yeah,
Maybe
so
not. No, not in the back of Airstrike.
yeah, so I could see that being a problem, but as somebody who is fresh into it, having played lots and lots of war games, and like you mentioned, like my main go-to aerial war game has always been Wings of War, Wings of Glory, and most of it has been out of print for a long time, and the community finally encouraged them to start bring it back in print. But we're kind of in the same boat as Doug has said with this, where it's like, well, okay, you said you're going to release this, you said it's in production. okay, we've gotten one or two planes, we haven't gotten starter sets in a while, that's supposed to be coming. So I'm coming from a game that has struggled, I guess, kind of like Blood Red Skies has, and I'm looking at Blood Red Skies and saying, oh, you've got all this stuff and it's all in stock. It looks great. But obviously my perspective doesn't really paint the whole picture. So I didn't want to change my score, after we had talked and I heard what the reality was. Because, I think it's important to show, okay, this is what it looks like on the outside, but as Kentuckian and through his contact with Doug have shown us, it might not really be that way. But yeah, so for me it was a 9. So you want to take us next to third-party support?
Yeah, so third-party support. Let me pull up here. I had some additional notes on this. Do other companies support the game? Miniatures, terrain, tokens, cards, whatever you need. So I will have to say there is some I think we beat it up a little bit from what we talked about when we said, the starter set and those things. And Doug, he gave me a comment on it as well. He said, yes, please. And only reason we haven't printed cards is a legal one. Andy Chambers gave Warlord Games an exclusive right to produce Blood Red Skies, so we would be in violation of that if we printed off cards from the Lead Pursuit website. So there's a bunch of lists out there and you can get, and there's people that have made a lot of fan stuff. So I think it's out there. I've seen a decent amount, I thought, on Etsy and some of like the wood burning companies. There's some companies that make like the Battle Group chip markers that are no-name companies off anywhere, and they're probably too small to go after. And Warlord hasn't turned into GW in a sense of they're going to go after the sick old grandma and her dog selling Etsy MDF markers. So I think there's a decent amount. It's probably less from what we've seen with other games. I think the sky is the limit for the 3D printed files. Like, that's out there by the very nature of just World War II stuff out there in droves. There's, I'd say hundreds, maybe under 100. There's all these different STL files and designers who have done stuff with planes. And I know there's kind of plenty of fan fiction that I've seen like drafted for scenarios. It's just not where people made, I think, the triangle that you need for the bespoke base in the planes and the STL files, and there's ways to get them. Lead Pursuit has a decent amount of stuff that you can kind of get after, but I'm trying to it's apples to oranges in my mind, because there's a lot of other games that we've seen that just make their money, selling the pin markers or selling Rob Prince, doing the history pin markers, and they latch onto that. I don't know of the main company that does that. That's not totally the Lead Pursuit guys are totally tied into the game, but I think you can find a decent amount out there. And I've seen even the cool bomb scale and flak positions that people have added to try to make for those flak rules and your bombing targets. Again, I've seen them as add-ons or mom and pop companies. I feel on Etsy the most. So I just don't, with every other game. There's MDF companies and everything else like that. They have a lot. I'm gonna say this one is a little bit on the low end on average. But what about you, Wyndehurst?
Yeah, so usually the first thing we ask is, do other companies support the game? And I think in what I could find, the answer is no. There aren't. It's not like saying, do other companies support muskets and tomahawks? Well, there's loads of companies that sell French Indian War miniatures, so you could say yes. And there's loads of companies that sell terrain that would work for that, so you could say yes. It doesn't really, because it's kind of more of a unique scale, I don't think there's companies necessarily that support it. However, you could find 3D models for every plane at this scale, or that you can print at this scale for every plane that was even concept that has ever existed. And I would imagine on the Facebook groups, you're going to find people who've come up with stats for every one of those planes and aircraft. The game has very little in the realm of terrain needed. You can print pictures out of clouds, and some people have made some really nice removable clouds, and with a base. Something I'm thinking of doing So, and then I have been able to get my hands on some third party of the measuring sticks. I did eventually find a guy on Etsy who was making laser cut acrylic ones that were really nice. So I got some for my Americans and for my Soviet MiGs, for, MiG Alley. And so there are like true third parties out there, I think, making the stuff you need. The only thing I haven't been able to find is the unique base with the tilt mechanism. I haven't seen that anywhere. Now, you can get regular aircraft bases. A lot of them will have like some sort of magnetic system at the top where you can tilt just the aircraft, like if it's banking and everything. So you could very easily get whatever airplane you want on a base like that and then just tilt the plane itself, and you don't need the whole moving base. So you could, I think, find everything you need third party with the exception of the rules. It is, like Kentuckian said, it is just maybe not as out there as we have seen with other rule sets. But I still, because
What's your score?
I scored it an 8 because I do think 3D printing is up and coming. So I think the access to that is a lot easier for people. And I've gotten a lot of stuff off Etsy, so I was able to find pretty much everything I needed. So I didn't get it like super high because it is not as prevalent as other stuff out there. But at 8 might be a little generous, maybe a 7. But I'm going to go with 8. What about you?
I gave it a 6, and it's mainly I think it's a windfall in my mind that STL printers and like 3D creators are going to get credit for like designing every plane and everything when they had so many other things in mind. Lead Pursuit being obviously a huge proponent of kind of the third party stuff, I think, and just kind of what they generated. That's I there's no like Sarissa, to accompany them. There's no like
Victrix.
Litco. What are you going to buy from them? There's no. I'm trying to think of like other companies that aren't miniature companies that I'm like, oh, if I'm playing whatever I'm playing, Hail Caesar, like this is where I'm going to get all my bases from. This is what I'm going to do, and there's nothing like that with
No.
BRS, and so that's why I give it the 6.
I would say, so Litco does have stuff for like Wings of War, Wings of Glory, but that could be more the nature that that game was discontinued for a long time. I think it's
Yeah,
very likely that if Warlord did discontinue providing these things, the community would find them for you. It would be more advantageous for actual companies to then sell it because there'd probably be less of a
yeah,
legal repercussion at
yeah,
that point.
yeah. And that's my defense of the 6 is I just don't want it. I think of all the other game systems we've played and rules reviews we've done where companies like make their meat and potatoes off like they're the little fish that swim under the shark. And there's really not a company that's like that for BRS that's swimming under
Yep.
BRS and living off the scraps.
Yeah.
But I'll kick it over to you for strongest. Our last two are favorite. And we've gotten comments about these. These are categories, where we try and to recapture some things that you can't get in like our 1 through 8 categories. I think our 1 through 8 do a good job, but this is where we try to really weight, I would say, scores. So I'll let you take it over to 9.
Okay, so 9 is our strongest reasons for it or against it, for playing the game. Now, we always caveat with this, if it's over a 5, we do recommend it. But we're going to list, kind of both our for and against. So for me, my kind of thoughts if I sum up Blood Red Skies, it does give an intense dogfight feeling where you're constantly trying to maneuver for position, but I found the shooting unsatisfying and the movement kind of fiddly, which kind of drew away from the enjoyment of that, kind of intense dogfight. So my score for that is I gave it a 7. I do think it's a fun game. I think you can have a lot of fun with it. It's a game. I'm really set on this rule set using the MiG Alley because that's. I haven't found any other rules out there that capture it as this simple. Nobody else, as my knowledge, is making a set of rules as simple and easy and fun to play as Blood Red Skies can be. That captures that. So for me, it is a game I'm going to keep playing. I've got like 12 aircraft for both sides for MiG Alley that I'm going to paint up, and I'm going to be playing this game. But It's probably going to be limited to McGalley from me because I have found other aero games that really scratch the itch more. But it is a fun game and it is one I highly recommend. That is available and everything's out there. You're not scrounging around trying to find out of print stuff off eBay. So if you're looking for an aerial combat game and you want to be able to get everything, I do recommend Blood Red Skies. What about you, Kentucky?
Strongest reason for fun. Underline, bold, underline, fun. It's definitely the itch for me for World War II combat. I can't think of another game in World War II combat that's in print, that is easily accessible, that would be out there with a decent sized community, even if it's a closeted community, than Blood Red Skies. And so for me, the strongest reason is you're going to have fun if you play with a 3 and a 5-year-old. You're going to have fun if you teach somebody to play it that you normally game other things with, or you're going to have fun, building your own community and listening to Doug and his boys on Lead Pursuit podcasts. And so I give it an 8.5. I think some of the minor detractions that we already talked about, like on it won't scratch everybody's itch, especially if you're steeped in this. But we said 5 is our average, so above average, way above average for me is the 8.5. It's definitely the fun. So I'll move into our last category. So we got a 8.5 and a 7 going into our last category, and I'll ask you to pull up your calculator real quick on your laptop as we talk the last category, because I'll give the scores to you, Wyndehurst, at the end of it, and then you can tell us what we rated it out of 10. So if you got your phone or whatever, I've been right. I've been
got
right.
mine written down.
Okay, I've got both of ours, and um, yeah, I'd like to know where we're at because I haven't looked at any of our other scores, and I want it to be almost a surprise for me.
Okay.
So the it factor, the game fun, additional caveats not captured in the other categories. We talked about muskets and tomahawks, like side plots, other things, the dice bag mechanic and bolt action, the patrol phase and chain of command, like these things that just make it. For me, it's the ability to do 50 pages of charts and rules in a 3 mechanism move. I think is something I've never seen of aerial combat, and to capture it in a way that gives you that cat and mouse, and we're not going out there and pulling periscopes up and down, which could give you really cool images. Definitely would give you that more, but I feel like it's still capturing it I've never seen an aerial combat game do that. And I've played a lot of, I have to be honest here with myself, like I have played dozens and dozens and dozens of aerial combat games, whether it be a chip-based Blue Max or whether it be World War One aerodrome in the Disselfink room of Historicon, or my dad. I remember he bought those pegboards, and we would play with the 22 caliber shells that you put in, like what your ammunition is and everything that you're shooting at people. Like I've played lots of those games, and they all bring their own thing. They all have a lot of fun. I remember uh, Battle Brush, the guy, I think it's John Lander, that lived in Lexington for a time. I think he's back in England now, but he had a World War One design rule set, and you're putting your movement down and then you're revealing kind of at the same time, if you're guessing, which is a really cool move to make sure that you guess right if the person's snaking. And I know some aerial combat games do that, but to give you the tension to off the advantage system and then to make sure it holds, it's not I think that was a knock that you gave it, but to make sure it holds with the, hey, it's about maneuvering, it's about out positioning, it's about using your combined kind of wing and your wingman, right? That's a term we use for a reason, to their advantage and to get this person in a kill zone. That, from what I've seen of aerial combat and what I've read, that really hits it to me. And so I think the it factor is the advantage disadvantage kind of system and how it replicates that. And I think the delay with the boom chits of being a super kinetic game from the onset, like how you just burst into flames, um, allows for that tension to build to where all planes are on a table and you're having a really good game in 30 minutes and you totally just didn't feel like you get creamed. That it's a good time, whether you're playing a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old. It's a great time. But what about your it factor? What do you have it?
I completely agree. The advantage
Aerosol.
system is really really elegant. It might not look elegant, and even my kids were like, "Why isn't diving down better?" To building energy and stuff. But like Kentuckian said, I won't say it all again. but capturing all of those mechanics, all of those nuances for aerial combat in a very simple mechanic that I think really captures the spirit of those elements, kind of distilled, is just really cleverly done and elegantly done. And if you go into it understanding that the goal isn't just shoot down your enemy, but to dominate the sky as a better pilot, to put them at such a disadvantaged position where they've either got to flee or they're going to die, then you couldn't. I don't think you could do it better than they did. I think that is a really nice mechanic. The only thing I ding it for is it kind of looks unintuitive and a little goofy. I know people have said that, to use like, facing down versus facing up, but it is a brilliant mechanic, and I scored it fairly high. How about you? What was your score?
I give it 8.5.
8 for me.
8.5. I just think it's a little bit of a top crust thing. Like, that's getting close to 9 for it to be so simple but yet so effective.
Yep.
So, what do you have? Do a recap of your scores and then tell us what you got.
Okay, so I gave it 8.5 per presentation. It's a beautiful game. 7.5 for what's it trying to achieve. Gatekeeping was a 6.5, and I told you all those reasons. Playability 7.5, mechanics 7.5, opponents a 6, support a 9, and remember that was my perspective coming to it fresh. Support by third party was an 8, strongest reason for against a 7, and the it factor an 8. So total score for me was a 75.5, very respectable score. How about you, Kentuckian?
Okay, I'm doing my last little bit right now. Hold on. I'm going to add. Yep, as a Kentuckian does. So I'm going to walk through my score on my calculator because my calculator on my phone here was jacking up. And I normally add it up before we do the rules reviews, but I didn't do that. So you'll be as surprised as I am for my my score here. So the book, I gave it an 8.5. And for the reasons that we talked about, I think it's a clean, easy to go book. You don't have to really try too hard on it. And, a couple of knocks on maybe not enough pretty pictures, it was up there. Trying to achieve and the fun, 9. Like, I think it's there in spades. You can't beat that. Gatekeeping. We went a little bit about the bespoke stuff on it, but I think it's such an easy game with such a great price. I gave it an 8 on gatekeeping. Playability, I'm giving it an 8.5. Again, Doug had mentioned those comments. We had talked a little bit about, the advantage system and picking it up or not having a fun game or learning it in a few turns. I still think you can learn it in a few turns, even if it's by yourself. Rules mechanics, I gave it an 8. There's some stuff that's going to be left wanting. But for me, it's definitely, I think it's hitting where I want to be in the rules pretty well. Community, I gave it an 8. And it's mainly Lead Pursuit Podcast doing all the work. Support, I'm giving it a 6. And we've talked about that 2 years, the issues and the concerns there. Third parties, again, I'm giving it a 6, mainly just because we said there's nobody like living on the undercarriage there. There's nobody that we think about like what we do with other wargaming systems that just totally feast off that. I don't want to have them just getting a total swing because the STL files are out there to get from anybody. I don't know if that goes directly to BRS, but I think it's a fringe benefit that gets them into the 6. And then strongest reason, fun, is 8.5. Because fun is always a desire for my game. I mentioned this when I've talked to people in the past, like about, hey man, if you're playing a Rommel game or World War II game or a Civil War game or whatever, and it's like, look down at your white, New Balance shoes. Like, you're not thinking about a lot of logistics, a lot of other things, and I think this puts you right in the perfect spot you need to be in to just pick the game up and have fun. And then lastly, I give the it factor an 8.5. And so the it factor for me is that system is just so nuanced. So it gets me to a 71, and 71 is a really good score for me. Um, I just think the biggest hits to it, which you're easily going to see it at that 80 level or around there, are the support and the third parties. Um, I want to say, and I don't think that's reflected in my score, and I surprised myself with my score. I think it's a must-have in your collection. Like I honestly do. I think it's for the $100 and for it to be what it is, with the starter set, and if you're coming over from a new system or if you're steeped in historical wargaming, and normally if you're steeped, you're pretty older, and old dogs don't like new tricks. This game you will like it will be fun. And I think for the reasons on hanging in there, not getting blown by, like that's where I see it. I the two sixes would probably be the only thing I'm kind of like caveating, because if you're saying my scores in the 70s, we've had a lot of 80s, rule books scored 80s, and we've had some. I don't think we've had a lot of. I think closest we've had is like V3 in the high 80s is what I've had it, or Chain of Command is right up there, like a point or two behind it. Again, I know that's controversial, but it's just different strokes for different folks. 70 is, in my mind, like take those factors out. I can't wait the it factor and the strongest reason for it almost anymore. Like I think this is a game that holds itself in the 80s, and I'm probably just being too hard on it because since I've been here in the beginning, like I think it's a must-have. Like I honestly do. I think it's a must-have for anybody, and you won't regret it. Like you will not. I say that a lot. Like our Dead Man's Hand games and all those other things. Like I can guarantee, you almost won't regret having this game if you're just wanting to have fun and roll dice. What about you, kind of tying this up, Wyndehurst? What are your thoughts on your score, my score, and any other kind of like comments?
Yeah, I think my score would have been a little bit closer to yours if I had experienced the support issues more like you had going through it. But again, I didn't want to change it just because I learned something after the fact. But I think a 70, a 70 it really means it's a solid game. It's like you said, it's a good palate cleanser. It's not the game you're playing every weekend when you get the chance. But if you're just feeling the itch for an aerial combat game and you don't want to, get a headache trying to figure out stuff or spend too much time have to relearn the rules every time you get it out, it really is a golden game. And I am super stoked. I ended up finally getting the Midway starter set because now I've got that game. I've got a great easy game for the Pacific. I've got another game for my European theater, and I think Blood Red Skies is going to be awesome when I start getting the McGalley stuff painted. And I'll probably introduce people to actually Blood Red Skies first, even if Wings of Glory, Wings of War is my go-to World War II game, because it is a game that is still available. It's out there. And if I'm going to be introducing people to a game, I want it to be a game they can get and enjoy and have fun with as well. And I feel like that's what Blood Red Skies is. It's a fun game that if I introduce it to somebody like, man, this is awesome, can I get it? I don't have to say, well, maybe if you can find it on eBay. It's like, oh yeah, right now it's still out there. Everything you need is still there and for a reasonable price point. And I'm hoping I can get some demo games here where I'm doing my recording, and maybe they'll stock some starter sets on the shelf and get some more people playing it. But yeah, I think our scores reflect that it's a solid game. I think that's what it shows. It's a solid game.
Solid game. Doug, beat us up. Lead Pursuit boys. Be controversial. Write a bunch of comments on the podcast and in the comments on Patrol or on the YouTubes. But we'll move over to our next section. I'll kick it back to you, Wyndehurst, for
so that's
the fun
officially
section.
The end of the rules review. I'm going to try and add tags now because some people have said, hey, can we skip the Alibis, caveats, and piggybacks? I just want the meat and potatoes. And so I'll try and tag this section. But our kit bag.
Short attention span people like me.
They just want to hear the rules. So kit bag, we like to talk about something that we think is useful for you to put in your kit, take with you. I don't believe we've talked about this one, but primers. Now, I've used a lot of different primers, and primers are base coat paints. I have used the Vallejo brush-on primer. I've used the Vallejo airbrush primer. I've used Army Painter rattle cans, and I've had great experience with all of those. So those are all in industry options that I recommend. I have not used GW paints, but that's more because I kind of personally boycott GW. I don't want to give them any money. I don't buy their paints because I don't like their pop-up ones, so I don't buy their sprayers either. But I posted a picture recently of a spray paint that I had gotten here. So one of my go-to, I probably use it more than the in company in theater stuff, is Rust-Oleum. Is a very generic, cheap, off-the-shelf like rattle can spray paint, and I find it has worked great for me. And any kind of those like adjacent, similar, just kind of basic spray paints that are made, that say they're made for plastic or metal, and a flat, matte color, has worked great. I've never had problems with it. I get very similar coverage as I would to the wargaming ones, and it's a very inexpensive option. You do need a little bit of practice with it. Because they're kind of not made to flow necessarily like the wargaming ones. It seems like there is a risk if you're too heavy-handed that it could clump up. And sometimes on some resin models, like resin cast models, I have found it stays sticky and never fully dries. But I've also noticed that sometimes with other brand aerosol primers, which is why I also have in my repertoire the brush-on primers, because if I run into that issue, that's a good alternative. But I recommend all the leading brand ones that are in hobby, but you can usually do pretty well with the kind of off-the-shelf cheap brand ones. What's your experience with primers, Kentuckian? What are you using?
I'd use like two different ones. I'll go to Rust-Oleum and stuff with like terrain. I'll go to cheap rattle cans for terrain. I normally won't do it for miniatures. I've been burnt too much on miniatures to use the cheap stuff, and especially with the price of miniatures and plastic going up, and then it can really ruin plastic. I've just tried to stay away. I do Army Painter or Citadel or GW's Evil Empire. I give some money to for them. They're a premium price compared to rattle cans, but in my mind, it's like the $10 extras for peace of mind. I normally haven't had any issues out of them. My only other caveat to this is the terrain, whatever you're building, doesn't matter. You're normally trying to layer it on anyways, and so it can't really destroy it. So I haven't, that's what I recommend that stuff for. And then I think with every good primer, it's more about the space and that stuff. So I know primers are a scouting report, and we talked a lot about this as you're doing hobby time, but I think the dehumidifier is the like goat. It is the workhorse of your priming way and how you're doing it, especially if you're like me in Wyndehurst and you grew up in the southeast, and the dehumidifier in a garage or somewhere is really saving models. And there's so many people online that I've stolen priming techniques from, to how close you are elevated so you don't get the bubbles, so you can man, everybody has a disaster with, I think it's mean green or whatever, where you have to dip them in it and get the primer off because it's bubbled up or it's done something crazy. But yeah, I think the dehumidifier is the unsung hero in the priming game. So I'm giving him his shout out to like, you and this can make this thing happen, buddy. But no, great thing I think for Kit Bag is we're both looking forward to getting back to the hobby time. I think it's super relevant where our lives, and the Department of Defense has kind of been not only our transition, but everything that's going on in the world. We'll just leave it at that. Has been kept us really busy for the last few months. So you don't really see me in Wyndehurst cranking out armies anymore or doing things like that. And we've gotten some decent amount of games in, even though we wanted to get back to this episode. So I'll move into scouting report that will kind of put this on the front burner. So scouting report, always forward looking of what we're going to do next and what we expect to see. We've have a lot of communications with different companies out there, and some big companies, some big people in the hobby industry, and I would say community. And I really look forward. Some are still in England that we look forward to talking to. That we've lined out some dates, and we hope to kind of get transitioned to have that lineup in the fall. So a lot of good things coming out of here, more rules reviews and things like that. There are people I know that message us to want us to do rules reviews or want us to do interviews, and her goal is to to listen to you and to try to get you on. But there are some things that we've tried to map out, and we've gone more than quarterly. And me and Wyndehurst, the our cycle of rules reviews, interviews, other things, hobby, kind of industry interviews as well, as far as just game people. We want to keep that cycle rolling. We want to highlight the community where we can, and so look forward to some new and exciting things. And I'll just keep it at that. As far as my personal scouting report, everything is about to get torn down back here. My nice new Fallschirmjäger helmet, my World War II helmet. I need to spray a spade or a heart on when I get to my next place. I'm headed to the Great Commonwealth of Virginia here in the next few weeks. Really looking forward to doing that. Sad always to leave a community that you've been with for the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm always happy to. The PCS is like a bittersweet pill moving with the military. You get so many entrenched relationships with the people, and you have them game at your house, or you game at their houses and the local stores and even the local communities, and it's a sad to go, whether you've hosted events or demos or whatever. But scouting reports forward looking, and so I'll leave here with a tear in my eye. I take the saddest day for me is probably going to be taking that eagle off my left shoulder, but looking forward to getting into some entrenched hobby area in Virginia, headed to Virginia. So if you're listening to this or you know something out there, I'll be in and around UVA and Charlottesville. I know there's a few stores that weren't there even the last time I was there, so I really look forward to getting into those stores. And then Richmond is a good, Waterloo connections and that gaming store that's in Richmond. I'm really looking forward to, man, they have a lot of awesome historical games they've posted. Messaged a buddy in Charlotte. I'm not going to say his name in case he doesn't want to be mentioned, but he has a good group. I think he's around Charlotte, North Carolina, and he built this big Pontic army in 28 millimeter. And so my Caesarians are calling back to me. Got a few things to finish on my goals when I get there, but I'll have a few weeks, and so before I start in August. So I really look forward to just cranking out some hobby stuff once I get settled and getting back to it. And I feel itchy right now, like a drug addict. And then my last thing to mention is I'll be OICing a Gettysburg Battlefield tour, and I'm really looking forward to that. I've already started reading Killer Angels again, watching the movies, going over some books and stuff to kind of put that together. I don't know if that'll happen in the fall or spring, but it's really made me want to back my Fire and Fury armies and get those on the table to recreate some stuff. So we'll see. A lot of stuff in store from my personal foxhole. What about you, Wyndehurst?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, we're in transition. For those who have no connection with the military, PCSing, like you said, it's a bittersweet, and it's got a lot of challenges that go with it. So I'm looking at the housing market being here what it is. We're opting for the base housing, and that's like a 1 to 5 month wait for us. So it could be a while before I'm really able to crack back into hobby stuff. Right now, all I have my hands on is Blood Red Skies and BattleTech, because that's one my kids really enjoy as well. I probably tried to bring 2 games that my kids like playing. Out here, though, there doesn't seem to be a very large wargaming community, but there seem to be quite a few people. The few that are here are very passionate about it and are excited to have one of them called me, a professional wargamer in the area. So I'm going to try and take some pages out of Kentuckian's book and really try and do some community building and promoting wargaming, maybe even try to run some of my own tournaments, some tried and tested games like Bolt Action and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that play kind of wargaming adjacent games, more of the card games, some GW stuff. So I think the community is ripe to get like a historical wargaming group going. So that excites me and gets me motivated to be here. But again, none of that can really start until I really get all my stuff back and I can get it set up and see what condition it's in, because it's traveled across an ocean and half a continent. Yeah. So and then once it gets here, I am in South Dakota. Deadwood is like an hour and a half drive away.
Dead Man's Hands games
Yes.
happening in Deadwood. That'd be sick.
Yeah, so there's a lot of Wild West history out here, and so I'm excited that we have done that so recently and it's fresh, because now I'm like motivated to do more with it, get some more games and run that, in the areas it's happened. I think that'd be really, really cool. Great opportunity. But, with our jobs, when you PCS, it's not just a move. I am going to have a significant bit of training at this new location that is going to take up some time. So be patient with us. Next month might also be a tight month with us getting an episode in. I can't record at where I'm staying. Luckily, I've got this location I can come to, but Kentuckian's going to be in the middle of a move the next couple weeks as well. So we try to only do 1 month a year where we don't do an episode, and usually that's down so we can travel and spend time with family over the summer. But this year it might be because we're moving. We missed 1 month last month, so we'll try not to miss any more months. But just be patient. We might have, like we have in the past, an episode come out on the first of a month or the second, and then another episode later that month. But we know that a lot of you enjoy listening to On Patrol, so we feel like we owe you all consistency and good quality stuff again, which is why this is our second. We've almost never done a second recording because we got 2/3 of the way through it last night, and it was just, the internet was so bad. It was not going to be a good product, and we weren't going to put out a bad product for you all. So even if it means this is coming out on the 30th or the 1st, we felt like we owed you all a good product that we felt comfortable putting our names on. And if we find that the next month makes that difficult as well, then understand if an episode doesn't come out, it's because we don't have the time or the ability to give you a good episode, and we'd rather not just put out a bad one just to fill in a month. So unless you have anything else you want to add, Kentuckian, I'll sign us off.
No, keep us motivated. I love other podcasts, and again, another shout out to Lead Pursuit podcast with Doug and his boys. Doug, truly appreciate all your comments. Your warm spirits at the cons and everything. You've been nothing but awesome. So I do hope that we're able to get some more Blood Red Skies curious people out of this episode. Um, you know, Unfortunately, we're not giving it a perfect score, but I think it's a must-have game. I will put it at must-have. Like I think every war gamer by buying this box and putting it on their shelf will not go astray, and it will be worth the money in it. And listen to Doug's podcasts with his gents and his co-hosts, and you'll have a hoot, you'll have a laugh. And then really look forward to the community's engagement in the summer. Even though we're PCSing, like we love giving the hobby pictures out, and it was mainly like Wyndehurst said back a long time ago when we started this thing, it was us motivating each other, and then we're just like, let's do it, and we'll create this thing where the conversations we had, we'll just talk through them. And I really, comment your projects over the summer. Throw them on Patrol's Facebook group. Throw them in our messages. Go out and show us what you're doing and your projects, your scouting reports, your kit bags, and let us know and interact with us. Because I'll be honest, through these trying times, and like I was getting real antsy there with the spring, turning into trips, turning into job, turning into shenanigans throughout the world, and then it was just a good place to like go in, the fortress of solitude, like the hobby space always is. You always got one or two out there, but like the community is what makes it. And I've really enjoyed talking to people that I've met, and really looking forward to, like when her said, me and him setting down our roots to some degree in these new locations and connecting with the community. And if you're in these locations, if you're in South Dakota or Virginia, reach out. Always up for a game. Love to host some of the games that you've seen, or love to play in your game that I normally don't game, and to give me another kind of idea of it. That's the bittersweet. It's always sad to see friends. John Pirtle, Jonathan, all the guys, Ben Lowry in here, and everything been amazing. The Nashville Track and Hole Club with James and Scott and everybody else up there has been amazing. And I'm sad. NashCon I've always gone to since I was a little boy, especially growing up in Kentucky, and to move on is definitely going to be some tears. But going to Virginia, I've got some excitedness about it, and I know Wyndehurst is kind of echoing all the same. So comment if you're out there, and we'd love to play a game with you. But then also comment and post your pictures and let us know what you're doing, because you're going to help motivate us as we go through this difficult time of not maybe having our hobby supplies every day. But no, truly appreciate it. Thanks again, everybody. And any feedback, we appreciate. Criticism, comments, everything. Wyndehurst, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Yeah, without further ado, everybody, grab your spear, your shield, your musket, your belt-fed machine gun, your ready flight plan, and join us on the next On Patrol. Dismissed.